This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. This week, our podcast is brought to you by the Australian Government. From the 1st of July this year, every Australian taxpayer will receive a tax cut. You can use the tax cut calculator at taxcuts.gov.au to estimate your annual tax cut and see what it means for you. Weekly Wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
Lots going on in AI news this week. From slop to those Telstra job cuts, we get you across it.
And then we have the death of the president of Iran and what the ICC did this week. In what's coming up, an election in the United Kingdom and nuclear sites.
Plus a whole lot of football. Squiz Recommends is brief, Claire, before we get into what will be in News Club this week. Let's do it. Most clicked link has had a late surge. Wasn't the most clicked link come Thursday night, but come Friday morning, boy oh boy, did it catch up. A portrait of Kate Middleton takes a bit of explaining.
It does. I'm sorry about this. It's another visual thing for podcast, but it does have some news value, so bear with me.
Yeah.
Tatler, which we've spoken about before, it's a society magazine and publisher in the United Kingdom. It calls itself the first social media. In recent times, they've commissioned artists to paint portraits of the royals for their July edition.
Okay.
In 2022, it was Queen Elizabeth. Last year, it was King Charles. This year, it's Princess Kate.
So is their July edition already out?
They preview it now. It goes on sale in
the PR.
in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
So they've released this portrait, this image. These artists are from diasporic backgrounds. And just to explain that, they're people whose ancestral homelands are places like Africa, the Caribbean. And I guess what we're getting at is that it's not an official portrait commissioned by the palace.
No, it most certainly isn't. But gee, haven't pictures of the royals been in the news a lot this year? Of course, we had Kate's photo of the kids, King Charles' official portrait, that pink one that was unveiled.
Pink, red?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it was a splash. Anyway.
Yeah, it was a splash. It has been a thing, and the reason why this one's getting a lot of attention is because a lot of people saying it doesn't look at all like Kate Middleton.
I quite like it, but I'm not an art critic. I don't know.
The link is in your episode notes. Slop, though, Claire, was the second most clicked link in the Squiz Today email. And the reason we're pointing it out is slop is the word that's being used for AI-generated nonsense that's cluttering up the internet. It's what spam is to email. It's what, pre-digital age, it's what junk mail was to your letterbox, I guess. I feel like it's going to be a word that's a regular part of the vernacular in years to come. So we wanted to point it out.
Exactly right. These new things, this new frontier that we're confronting, I guess, with artificial intelligence. And that term is part of the biggest story of the week. So let's start at the top of that. We had Telstra announce this week that they're going to cut 2,800 jobs, nearly 400 workers immediately. The rest will go over the course of the year. It's about 9-10% of Telstra's workforce.
Yeah, what CEO Vicky Brady said was most of the roles are in the enterprise business, so that's the business. They provide services to big and growing businesses around Australia. The main reason for the cut is that those services aren't as big a part of the Telstra business as they used to be. If you work in an office, these things will be familiar to you. A lot of the programs you use are in the cloud rather than being dedicated to fixed infrastructure as they used to be.
Yeah, so back in the day, if you worked in an office, there'd be a room that had a really big server in it that clunked along and only the really sort of smart guys went into. They don't have them anymore. It's all in the cloud.
And of course, phones. We don't have handsets anymore. So that part of the business is changing.
Yep, exactly right. And it's that snapshot into the changing nature of work as well. Vicky Brady herself said, I don't have a phone on my desk. So I don't expect that many people do. Of course, working from home is a whole thing. You don't have a fixed line anymore. Those job cuts will achieve Telstra a saving of $350 million. A lot of that will go into redundancies. And look, it's just important to note, I guess, that the company has decided to cut those jobs and not redeploy workers to another part of the business
altogether. And this is where the AI conversation, the artificial intelligence conversation comes in. I completely missed a significant announcement, and so did you, Claire, last week that Telstra has engaged software firm Infosys to accelerate its use of artificial intelligence. That's actually had quite a bit of coverage in the business papers. It's this idea that AI is starting to take Aussie jobs.
Look, if you do go into those business pages this week, particularly in light of those job cuts, there's been quite a bit written about why that's not the case in this instance, not directly anyway, but it does raise huge questions about what impact artificial intelligence might have on jobs. The federal government's already done a bit of thinking about this, and what it says is that AI and automation will actually help grow our economy. They reckon that could be in the order of an extra 170 billion to 600 billion a year to Australia's bottom line over the coming sort of really 6 years or so.
Jim Chalmers saying, our treasurer, it's okay. It's all right. There'll be jobs.
It's going to be helpful.
But, I mean, there's still plenty of people saying there's a lot of uncertainty about what those jobs might look like and the actual impact. One thing's for sure, Claire, it is coming. Big businesses are investing a lot in the technology, particularly where there are, I guess, repetitive processes that could be done by machines rather than people. And when it comes to the technology that everyday businesses, internet users can access off the shelf, there have been some significant announcements also this week from OpenAI and from Google about the steps they're taking this week and last week. Google was last week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The bulk of it was last week, but some of the detail has been coming out this week. And I guess if you're a bit of a tech nerd, you've probably really boned up on all of this. But just to go over it, OpenAI has unveiled ChatGPT 4.0, O for Omega. They say that it's natively multimodal, and essentially what that means is that it can do lots of things all at once. So it can process visual content, it can also do audio in real time, which is just mind-blowing. Google has also talked about what it's doing with its Gemini program. It's its artificial intelligence program. It's announced that AI features are going to be across a lot of its products and services that it already provides. So we're talking about internet search when you Google something. We're talking about its workspace, so the tools like Google Docs and Sheets and all that sort of stuff. Also, its creative tools for videos, photos and music.
You can watch the ad for Gemini. I feel like that kind of sums it up. We might put a link to that ad in your episode notes, because that sort of helped me understand the broad announcement. And if you're not using the tools, you can kind of miss it. The idea is it's supposed to make our life easier. I had a go of ChatGPT 4.0, Omega, whatever we're supposed to call it. You have to pay about $20 to test it a month. I don't think I signed us up full time. Don't worry. I think I just did the trial.
I'll go and check the bank account.
I was underwhelmed.
I say you don't know how to use it properly.
Claire was sitting next to me as I did this, and I was, asking it to design a certain thing, and it was not getting me at all.
No, because you like yelling it like a person going down the street. I wouldn't know. Like if I didn't know you, I wouldn't know what you were talking about. But anyway.
So Claire is teaching me to teach the machine, I guess. But I guess the disclaimer on that is it was an interesting experiment. It is good to test these things out. I was using it for research. We don't use AI to do the squiz. We don't use it in our work, but we are a news business. So it's worthwhile to give a quick update on how these AI chatbots are getting their answers to news questions you might ask them.
Yeah, because, of course, asking questions to these platforms is going to be a really big part of how we integrate it into our lives. You'll go to Google search in the future, and when you Google something, it'll actually give you an answer. It won't give you a list of websites to go and do your own thing. So it's a big question then about how those platforms get the information to form their answers, and professional publishers, so people who do news, that it's verified, that it's high quality sources. These chatbots are essentially scraping the internet for that quality information and the content of professional publishers. So there's this whole discussion now about the sustainability of publishers, given their content is basically forming the basis of what these platforms are actually delivering.
There was a development on this week. News Corp, so the Murdoch-run media company, has struck a content licensing pact with OpenAI. Is it calling it a pact an important point?
A It's an agreement.
An agreement. You just wanted to say pact?
Well, that's what they say it is.
That's what they say. Okay, it's worth $250 million over 5 years. It formally lets OpenAI use content from News Corp's publications to answer users' queries to train its technology. Plenty of people saying that's way too cheap.
Giving it away, giving all of that work that you do away way too cheaply. Other publishers are taking a very different tact. The New York Times, for example, it's going another way. It's suing OpenAI at the moment. It basically says that the chatbot has stolen their content.
These are big issues. It's certainly stuff that keeps us up at night and, brain explosion kind of stuff for publishers, but we're definitely just at the start of it. Outside of AI, Claire, a big week for international news. First of all, Monday morning, news came through that there was a helicopter crash in northern Iran. Iran's president, Ibrahim Raisi, was on board. He died, aged 63, as well as the foreign minister of Iran and 6 other passengers. Since then, there's been a funeral. One important point here is the president is not the most senior figure in the country.
No, that figure is the supreme leader, who is the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He's 85 years old. The way that it works is that the supreme leader rules for life. And the thing that I don't think I properly realised, and when we're confessing things we didn't quite realise about the news this week, is that Raisi was expected to take over as the supreme leader.
Depending on what you read, I've read a few different things, but he was certainly in line and was certainly an option. I guess what this story has done, certainly for a global audience, is put back into focus the leadership in Iran. They're, of course, one of the key supporters of Palestine and Hamas. They want to see the end of Israel.
Exactly right. And some of the attendees at the president's funeral this week, it's notable to look at who they are. The head of Hamas's political wing was there, also the head of Hezbollah as well. They're based in Lebanon, the really conservative end of Islamic resistance. The Ayatollah actually met with Hamas after that event as well.
According to reports, that did happen. Back on Raisi for a second, he held positions of power in Iran since he was 25 years old. As I said, he died at age 63. Back then, he was the deputy prosecutor in Tehran, so the capital. During that time, he was given the nickname the Butcher of Tehran. That's because he was accused of being one of the 4 judges who oversaw the mass execution of thousands of political prisoners in the late 80s after the Iran-Iraq War.
And more recently, he became the president in 2021. He took steps to really crack down on dissent and political opposition. People might remember in 2022, we certainly talked a lot about it at the time, the deaths of women in custody. They were women who refused to wear a head covering in public. There was also a huge crackdown on protesters across the country. Protesters came out in unprecedented numbers to support change.
Yeah, they were the biggest protests Iran has seen since the revolution that kicked off the current republic in the late 1970s. So when you look at how Iran is mourning Raisi's death, plenty countered that mourning with celebrations. However, there's no expectation a change of president will make any of that better for particularly the women of Iran. From there, we go to The Hague, Claire.
Yeah, so to The Hague, where the International Criminal Court is based, the ICC. This week, the chief prosecutor there applied for arrest warrants for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar. What he said was that there were reasonable grounds to go after them because he believes both men bear criminal responsibility for war crimes, also crimes against humanity, from the day that Hamas's attack happened in Israel on the 7th of October.
Yeah, there's also warrants out for Israel's defense minister, Hamas's political leader, along with the group's military chief. The fallout to this, especially in the news commentary, is really huge, in the political commentary.
Yep, it all goes down to really how countries and leaders see Israel in all of this. That has been the major talking point. Joe Biden called the ICC's move outrageous. His quote was, "Whatever this prosecutor might imply, there is no equivalence, none, between Israel and Hamas." And I guess there's a bit to understand about the ICC, what those arrest warrants mean, the memberships. For example, the United States isn't signed up to the ICC. They're not a part of that whole thing. And also, it's sort of complicated because the US does actually support the ICC's move to put out an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin.
Maybe shortcuts next week is the ICC.
maybe.
Tricky?
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you already got something planned?
Well, kind of got something in my head.
Oh, okay. Not
Yeah.
this.
Maybe.
If you'd like a shortcut on the ICC, please
We do
flood
take
Claire's
requests
inbox.
here at
We
the
do
Squiz.
take requests. I think I need it because
Yeah.
it is a big thing to understand. It's become a political flashpoint here in Australia too, as the coalition says, in no uncertain terms, it agrees with Joe Biden. It's criticised Anthony Albanese for not going as hard.
Yeah, so initially Anthony Albanese said he didn't want to comment on court processes in other parts of the world. It took a few days really for him to line up with that view that the ICC perhaps had overstepped the mark. What he eventually said is, there's been an application, there's been no determination by the ICC against any individual or anybody, and he's right. It's just an application for an arrest warrant at this stage. The court hasn't actually made a decision or heard any evidence about any of this.
And while we're still in this part of the world, in addition to this, we also saw this week Norway, Spain and Ireland say they would recognise a Palestinian state. That's a symbolic move, but one that Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, called a prize for terrorism.
Fair to say there's a bit going on.
There is a bit going on. A message now from our podcast partner, the Australian Government. Doctors, dentists, education, groceries, we're talking household expenses. It adds up. We're here to tell you today that changes to Australia's individual income tax rates and thresholds mean every Australian taxpayer will be getting a tax cut from the 1st of July this year. This means there's a good chance you might be paying less tax each payday and keeping more of what you earn to put towards those expenses. Just head to taxcuts.gov.au and use their online calculator to estimate what your annual tax cut will be. Coming up in the news, a couple of things to put on your radar that are not necessarily for next week. But they're coming up one could be. The one that could be is Peter Dutton has said the coalition will announce the locations of some proposed nuclear sites soon.
Soon. That's quite a teaser, isn't it? Yeah. So the coalition has been talking a lot about nuclear power, that it should be part of our energy mix, and it's really intensified in the last couple of weeks. And this week, Peter Dutton said that they're going to announce the location of up to 7 possible sites for nuclear reactors in the coming weeks, so could be next week. We'll wait and see. They're expected to be located in seats that are held by National Party MPs or Liberal MPs.
Yeah, lots of people curious about where they might be. Of course, they're not in power, so it doesn't matter unless they get elected, but yeah, it's still a lot of people watching that announcement. We did a shortcut on the nuclear power debate and how it could work for Squiz Shortcuts, so that was one of my recommendations that was taken up for Squiz Shortcuts, and it is very, very, very good, and I highly recommend it if you want to give that a listen. The other thing to put on your radar that definitely isn't happening next week, but it is happening soon, is that Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, announced a date for their general election.
Yep, that is July the 4th. Enter into an election campaign. That's definitely happening from next week, really. It's 6 months earlier than they really had to hold it, but the lead story in our Squiz Today podcast on Friday lays out exactly all the challenges that Sunak has been facing. The Tory party, which he's the leader of, have been having quite a lot of challenges there. And of course, you'll remember they've changed prime ministers quite a lot in the last few years. So the decision to bring it forward, he says the government reached 2 major milestones and it's a good time to go. He says that reducing inflation to its lowest rate in 3 years is an important thing to do, and also growing the economy faster than any G7 country. So he reckons he's got a bit of a platform to stand on.
Still was a bit of a surprise for those who watch this stuff closely. He also did it in the rain. That was the thing. He was very wet.
It's worth having a look.
If you haven't seen him, announcing the date of the general election.
That stuff really tickles me. He's drenched.
He's standing out at 10 Downing Street because he says that it's important that the Prime Minister stands at 10 Downing Street to announce the date of the general election. But it was raining.
It was pouring.
There was a
with
protester
rain.
in the background playing a song related to the Labor Party. It was, we are former political staffers, so we look at that and go, God, not ideal.
Not ideal. And imagine being those people trying to manage that.
Not ideal.
The worst.
Not ideal. Anyway, the other thing that's coming up this week is quite a bit of football, if we're keeping it UK branded.
Yes.
Not soccer, football.
Not soccer, it's football. So tonight we've got the men's A-League Grand Final. That's on at 7:45 in the East. if you're looking at that time. Central Coast is hosting that. That's between the Central Coast Mariners and also the Melbourne Victory. You can catch that on Channel 10 or Paramount Plus.
Next Friday, so in nearly a week's time, the Matildas will be taking on China in a friendly match in Adelaide.
Sold out as well. Yep. You can catch that on Channel 10 or Paramount Plus. That's at 8:10 p.m, so put that in your diary. Also, if you're a soccer fan, you might have to do a bit of channel flicking because the first time in Australia there's going to be two premier Italian teams playing. That's Milan and Roma. They're going to be playing in Perth. It's 9 o'clock. Australian Eastern Standard Time on 7+.
The same night as the Matildas.
Exactly right, on Friday.
There you go. Yeah. Hey, I wonder who scheduled that. I feel like that's my weekend reading. I'll get into that a little bit.
Interesting one, right?
Monday's the start of Reconciliation Week. Canberra, you have a public holiday on Monday for, is it your picnic day? Is it your family day? Friends and family?
Reconciliation.
It's they get one for reconciliation. There you go. And on Tuesday, Claire, the ABS are releasing their retail trade data.
That's always interesting. I like a bit of retail intelligence. So we'll see how people are spending at the shops. It's also Kylie Minogue's birthday.
How old is she, Claire?
She's going to be turning 56.
Claire thought she might be about
in her 60s.
You thought she was turning 65, I think.
I think that's what I decided.
You were adamant. You were adamant.
Look, you've just got to lean in and say it with conviction. It's surprising what people will believe if you say it with conviction.
She looks great. She's doing great.
Yeah, she's
Happy
amazing.
birthday, Kylie. And on Thursday, Claire, is the International Day of the Potato.
Oh, what a great day.
Siobhan wants to have a potato off with you.
Yeah, she's got very weirdly competitive about this.
I know.
I just think the more people that like potatoes, the better, so I'm embracing it.
She would like to take you on who can name the most potato dishes in 1 minute.
Like, okay.
Maybe put that on our Instagram channel later in the week.
If we have to, I guess. Yeah, sure.
Squiz recommends, Claire, you and I don't go out much, if ever.
That's, one feature of your life and mine. We don't go out a lot.
We don't go out a lot. Yeah. We went out to dinner twice this week.
Yeah, with each other and other people.
Yeah, like together for work. We have no recommendations because of it.
It's really put a big dent in our recommendations seeking time.
Yeah.
Haven't watched any telly again.
Haven't watched anything.
Read the news.
We've read a
bit, but haven't read much beyond that. So, no, you're on your own, Squizzes. Sorry about that.
Sorry, this week there is no recommendations from us. Squiz Press, though, we do have a couple of things to tell you about. First of all, News Club next week will be an interview with Annabelle Hickson, who runs Galah magazine. Magazines are back.
Particularly beautiful work that she does.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to her about that. She also had some really interesting observations. For those who don't know a lot about Galah, it's a regional publication and it's all about bringing to life outside the city and celebrating the bush. And she has a lot of observations about local news and what's happening with local news. And she also talks to me about perceptions of people in the bush and how they vote and the sort of people they might be, which I found fascinating. And that was in the context of the referendum that we had last year. So that episode will be out on Tuesday, an interview with her. We also talked a little bit on News Club this week, which was about baby reindeer. If you haven't had a listen and you're interested, that is a great episode, but just about the rhythm of News Club and changing that up a little bit.
The point about that, I guess, is we do quite a bit of content. We want to make sure that it's high quality and we want to make sure that you're able to have the space to be able to consume it as well. So we just want to have a think about all of that. And also, Kate, as we said on News Club, I reckon you do great interviews. So building some space around that as well, I think is going to be a bit of a winner for us.
Stand by for some announcements, more series-based approach rather than a weekly rhythm for News Club, but we think it'll add a lot of value for you as the listener and also make sure we can keep the content as high quality as we really want it to be. Thanks for listening to this episode of Weekly Wrap. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back with you next week. Kate Watson, co-host of News Club and The Weekly Wrap, jumping in here to say thank you for listening to our podcasts first and foremost. And if you like them, we'd really appreciate it if you could share them. Tell your mates about us. Tell your family. Tell your barista. Tell your hairdresser. Whoever you think might be interested in the news that we cover. You telling people about us is still the number one way we grow. Thanks in advance.